Hey, you kids remember demo discs? Pepperidge Farm remembers. Once upon a time in the West, demo discs were the way we got to play upcoming PC games before they were released. It was a neat little gimmick in that we got to play a section of the game as a bit of a tease of what to expect from the full version. Sometimes we got random levels completely out of context, sometimes we got very specifically constructed tutorials, sometimes we got levels that would never actually make it into the finished game, but were instead built specifically to show off the tech and the gameplay. As a devotee of PC Gamer back in the 90s, I'd look forward to each and every issue that came packaged with a demo disc. I played the demos for Final Fantasy VII, Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine, System Shock 2, and even Half-Life. The demo for Half-Life was how I convinced my parents that first-person shooters wasn't a scary or a bad thing, as it was essentially like playing a Hollywood action movie. But we no longer live in the age of physical media, no matter how much Best Buy wants us to think that we do. However, thankfully, we do have Steam and a bevy of wild, wonderful new demos that were released recently as a part of Steam Nextfest. There was a shit ton of demos this time around, like fucking a lot. I didn't get a screenshot of just how many games I wanted to get demos of, but holy shit. I realized I needed to cut myself off because I still have to finish playing System Shock. Anyways, rather than go through every single one of the demos that I played during Nextfest, I'm going to present a showcase of the games that caught my attention the most in the order that I played them. I played each one for around 30 to 40 minutes, long enough to get a good feel for the game. Now, some of them I completed, but not all of them, but each of these games are games that I will be buying at launch. So, without further ado, years in development, a Kickstarter, a Patreon, and mountains of hype have finally led to this demo, and after playing it, I have 3 words. Believe the hype. Somehow this game is running on GZ Doom, which is nearly impossible to tell if you weren't looking carefully enough. Just fucking look at this game. Whatever black sorcery, magic, witchcraft that developer Altered Orbit has conjured is potent and powerful, and creates a gorgeous, immersive experience that will drag you in and refuse to let go. We play as Dawn, a soldier on what I think is a space station or an outpost off of Earth, which is currently under attack by unknown hostiles. You're a one-woman army going full die-hard on their asses as you make your way through Selaco to figure out what's going on and how to put an end to it. First things first, this is not a run-and-gun boomer shooter. This is far more tactical and has a lot more in common with Half-Life than it does with Doom. Enemy AI is ruthless and precise, working to outflank and outmaneuver you at every possible instance. You're going to be ducking and moving from cover to cover, popping up and out when you can to return fire. Dawn also has a great slide move which can be used to get up close and personal real fast, or to move quickly out of cover. If you take too much damage, you'll want to utilize that cover to let your health regenerate slightly so you can risk taking more shots at your oppressors. Now, based on that, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Selaco is a bit of a cover shooter, but that's far from the truth. While there is regenerating health, it only regenerates up to 35 HP, so sitting back and letting your whole health bar refill is far from an option. Health pickups and consumable med packs will assist in keeping you in the green, but you'll be staring down the barrel of minimal health a lot due to how nasty the enemy soldiers are. They move fast, hit hard, and force you to simultaneously stay mobile and stay frosty. Ducking behind cover and camping is not an option. They will come for you. Fortunately, with the interactive nature of the game world, you can create makeshift cover on the fly, such as knocking over a hospital stretcher to duck behind. You can enter a room and turn off the lights to make it more difficult to be spotted, or open and close window barriers to help provide protection. While the demo intentionally doesn't have much in the way of story elements, it's clear that there's going to be a lot going on in the game world as you progress. You have a PDA for collecting data logs, lore and codex entries, key codes, the whole nine. Some info that you can collect is strictly world building. Others provide valuable information for how to progress through the game. Selaco demands gamer attention, simultaneously asking you to move quickly through combat incursions while picking through the environment for necessary clues. It's a delicate balance that the devs seem to strike effortlessly, crafting a breathtakingly exhausting experience that will leave you trying to catch your breath anytime you've cleared a room. Along the way, you'll be collecting credit chips to cash cash in at vending machines to upgrade your health, refill your health, or purchase other necessities. You can find credits lying around or earn them through the game's challenges, such as killing an enemy right as they're about to throw a grenade, causing them to drop it. Another thing that definitely should be noted is that Selaco's difficulty is no joke. I went in on the Captain difficulty as it looked like the closest to ultra violence that I normally play, and I got my shit rocked hard during my playthrough. Enemy AI is already fierce and brutal with their flanking tactics and the way that they hunt you, but on Captain difficulty, I took vile amounts of damage even while dealing it back with my weaponry. Some games in the FPS genre take their difficulty very seriously, like Blood, and not every game has their difficulty scaled equally to others. While I probably won't be playing on Captain setting for my first playthrough on full release, I do appreciate the dedication to making this a rough ride for the player and the ability to scale just how rough it can be. There's even an option at the opening to set up the gameplay experience from traditional FPS gameplay with the option to rifle start each new map to hardcore mode with no saves. There seems to be something for every type of FPS gamer here, and it's ready to be utilized. It's really hard to encapsulate Selaco in a 5-minute review because there is so fucking much to this game. So much so that it's wild to think that this is still in alpha state. There's multiple placeholders and warnings that this is still early and rough, bracing players to temper expectations. But what's on display here is so good, so deep, so dense, that if this is alpha shit, then I don't know if I'm fully prepared for what the full release will look like. Playing through this demo reminded me of the first time that I played Half-Life. It's that kind of experience. There is a wealth of gaming goodness on hand here that is not only impressive, but it's quickly turning out to be something that is absolutely essential to play once it arrives. Considering the amount of hype already surrounding Selaco, saying something like that might sound like an echo chamber, but I have to absolutely stress this. Selaco is poised to be the next big sea change in first-person shooters. From Wolfenstein, to Doom, to Duke, to Quake, to Half-Life, to Halo, to Dusk, to Doom Eternal. There have been entries into the FPS genre that delivered groundbreaking work that immediately sent ripples throughout the community and inspired new games to implement certain gameplay elements in order to keep up with the latest and greatest. I am so excited to see Selaco get added to that list of renowned titles when it releases, and I am willing to put money down that it will deliver. I've had my eye on this game for a hot second, and when I saw that there was a demo during Nextfest, I downloaded it so fast I practically burned up my internet connection, and the moment I started playing it, I immediately knew it was one of the best in the show for me. Fashion Police Squad developers Mopeful Games have an absolutely beautiful and masterful handling of comedy writing, gameplay mechanics, and graphical presentation. The only downside I can see to the state of the game, which is no fault of its own, is that the aesthetics could lead to gamers overlooking it as simplistic or cartoonish, which would be a goddamn shame as this is a wildly creative, new FPS that deserves your attention. The concept of the game is that we're playing as Sergeant Dez of the Fashion Police Squad in the city of Trendopolis, where crimes of fashion are currently being committed. Dez, dressed to the nines with the slickest of drip, is sent in with his arsenal of correctional weaponry to combat the crimes and possibly even discover a couture conspiracy. First off, I have to say, the aesthetics on display, from graphics to sound effects and soundtrack, perfectly capture SNES excellence. I recently reviewed Extranium, which invoked the best of 1992 Super Nintendo, and here Fashion Police Squad feels like a game straight out of 1995. Crisp, clean, colorful, harkening back to Mode 7 graphical brilliance. The game has little touches like the single frame animations, the pixel graphic art style. It's just so good. I love the Super Nintendo era, one of my favorite generations of gaming, and to see more throwback shooters embracing this aesthetic and executing it very, very well warms my gamer heart. Meanwhile, gameplay is deceptively simplistic, underselling a surprisingly complex combat loop beneath it. Sergeant Dez starts out with his trusty shotgun, the To Die For, a color blaster which can infuse some pop into the drab and dull grayscale corporate suits that we first encounter. The To Die For has infinite ammo and also has the ability to drain excess color from other objects in order to supercharge its shots. Draining color is the only way to defeat another type of enemy whose fashion crimes are wearing colors that are way too loud. Another enemy wears ill-fitting suits which can be sewn into a better fit using the machine gun of the game, the Tailor-Made, a sewing machine gun. If you hadn't caught on yet, this game is full of puns. Dez also wears a belt which can double as a whip, used not only to stun enemies, but also is necessary for defeating enemies that wear sagging pants. The whip also doubles as a mobility item, where you can use it to swing from flagpoles just like Indiana Jones. Now, each enemy can only be defeated with the specific method necessary, meaning you'll be weapon swapping on the fly while utilizing the belt to stun and swing around. In the first part of the demo, combat is a little underwhelming, as you're introduced to the various methods and mechanics, but by the end of it, I was pressed while jumping and dodging and strategically tackling each enemy type in order to whittle them all down. Once I hit this point, I understood how the devs were working the mechanics to be more complex than they first appeared, and I marveled at the genius of it. There's so much here to appreciate, from the gameplay to the writing. Shit, I haven't even touched on the writing or the humor. There are so many jokes, so much tongue-in-cheek humor and presentation that in lesser hands could be either cringe or worse, even offensive. But Fashion Police Squad is earnest and good-natured and clearly understands the tropes and humor inherent in fashion culture. At the end of each map is a quick catwalk sequence of every enemy you fashionized. The armor and health pickups are swag and mocktails, and when Dez activates what is essentially a berserk pickup, the fabulous glove, he does a spin and a dead drop and proceeds to rush forward, slapping some fashion sense into every enemy he finds. I was laughing, I was giggling, I was clapping my hands. The clear amount of passion and understanding of the culture is present and helps establish the game's identity. I was floored by Fashion Police Squad, and I loved every second of it, and I am deeply, deeply excited to be able to play more when the game fully releases. This is just a feel-good time filled with satisfying combat and mechanics and a true sense of style. This one kind of came out of nowhere for me. Somewhere in the couple of days leading up to Nextfest, I stumbled across this game on Twitter, and when Nextfest went live, I saw that there was a demo for it. Coincidences are some of my favorite happenstance events, so I eagerly booted up the demo when I got to it, and was thoroughly surprised at just how damn well this game merges the elements and atmospheres of Dead Space and Doom 3, including certain mechanics such as save stations and a PDA for navigation. Developed by From Beneath Software, Retchid sees the player cast as an unnamed engineer caught in the aftermath of an alien biological event with cosmic horror undertones that is insidiously unsettling. There isn't a lot in the current demo, and being in alpha state, the game is admittedly rougher than some of the other games that I experienced. But what's here is very promising, leaning into the isolationist horror of its influences rather than striding into outright boomer shooter territory. Graphically, the game resembles the id Tech 4 engines which Doom 3 and Quake 4 ran on, and while not as bump-mapped or fleshy as those games looked, Retchid ends up looking more like the second cousin of those titles, in the best possible way. Lighting effects and detail work on the models are pretty good thus far, as are the majority of the sound effects. One criticism that I did note is that the taser and machine gun could use a little work with their sound effects, as both kind of come off as well, they both just kind of sound a little weak at the moment. I didn't really mind the taser as much as the machine gun, but the taser could also definitely use a little work on impact feedback, as it was kind of hard to tell if it was doing any damage. Thankfully, both the shotgun and the rocket launcher feel great to use right now, and the overall combat mechanics are very solid. No notes there. I do really like how the game emphasizes weird body horror the further you go. While most of the enemies in the demo are humanoid zombies, there are some ethereal aliens that float around, and eventually we experience them changing one of the humanoids into some kind of hybrid. The gradual build and introduction of these elements is part of what makes Retchid stand out, as any horror game worth its salt is defined by how it handles the atmosphere. Coupling the visual design, the progression, and the insanely well done soundtrack which conjures Aubrey Hodge's Doom 64 composition, Retchid is far and away one of the most intriguingly intense games I've sat down to play. And that's just in the alpha state. Looking ahead, I can only imagine how much more fraught this is going to be as it marinates in development. Look, I'm a sucker for space horror. Alien, Event Horizon, Dead Space, any media along those lines immediately has my attention and my interest. What holds that attention and interest is execution. Right now, developers from Beneath are only a 3-person group creating this game, and this work shows impressive promise. It's hard to get too deep into the game as it is, and to be honest, this feels more like a tech demo or proof of concept work to garner feedback and get player interest. Which is great, because if that's the case, it has succeeded. I am 100% down for this game day one on release, whether they do early access or full version, and I'll be keeping a close eye on this one for updates. Holy fuck. Developed by UK Resistant, Hellscreen is a weird marvel of a shooter that I straight up did not think was going to work for me when I saw initial footage of it. The notion of having a rear view mirror constantly at the top of your screen in order to see behind you felt way too gimmicky to be anything that could be actually useful or even desirable in an FPS. And while the glitchy CGA graphics had a unique vibe, I was confident that I was going to go in, play this game, and walk out on the other side just kind of meh at best. Boy, oh fuck was I wrong about this one. Hellscreen's second screen is more than just a fun gimmick. It is an outstanding gameplay mechanic that feels natural and intuitive almost immediately, with bonuses to utilizing the screen in combat. For example, the game already has a mechanic in place where your weapons do double damage if you're moving forward while attacking, but your weapons will do quad damage if you shoot behind you while moving forward. And the neat thing about shooting behind you is that the moment you right click to shoot backwards, your weapon will immediately appear in your rear view screen with a target reticle to help you aim, and left clicking to fire forward again will immediately swap your weapon of choice back to the front. It is simple, instantaneous, and loads more fun than it has any right to be. Another fun aspect of the mirror is that certain enemies and areas will only be fully visible and vulnerable if you're looking at them in the rear view screen. Of course, if you're trying to navigate by the smaller window alone, that could get tricky since it is admittedly a lot smaller than the rest of the screen. But a simple button press will enlarge the rear view so your screen is split evenly, allowing you to see with less difficulty. Experimenting with this was so fucking fun. I can't overstate this. This is a marvelous, fun, wickedly cool game with a thundering soundtrack, great sound effects, a wicked shotgun, and a strange, unique aesthetic that defies description. Currently, my only complaints are that the default game volume is really low for some reason. I had to turn up the volume way high in the settings just to hear things clearly. I'm not sure if that's a glitch, an intentional thing, or a system error, but I would definitely encourage UK Resistant to take a look at sound settings as the development continues. Hellscreen is stylish, entertaining, and wild as fuck to even contemplate, let alone play. I can't believe that this is a real game in the year of our Lord and Savior John Romero 2022, and it is a great example of walking into a game without expectations. I am fully invested in seeing more of this game and hopefully getting to play more of it soon. Thus far, I've had mostly positive and unilateral praise for the demos I've been talking about, but this is where we get to the one game I wanted to showcase that is really rough in development so far, but is so fucking promising that I want to see it get work and love. Diluvian Ultra is being developed by Crest Helm Studios, and at one point had a crowdfunding going for it. I heard about both the game and the crowdfunder at the same time, and I was so impressed with the visuals and the idea behind it that I actually went to contribute, but sadly saw that I had just missed the deadline to help out, and also that it had missed the funding goal. I was really disappointed and worried that I might not see more of this game, but thankfully, here we are, a Nextfest demo and a taste of what to come. The setup is convoluted, involving an eldritch prince/knight awakened from a type of cryogenic slumber to discover his kingdom and people are in ruins. Then he sets out to discover what has befallen his world. There's a lot of weird, strange, twisted, made-up words for the lore that made me giddy with the excitement of discovering an entirely new lore in the way I discovered Warhammer 40k once upon a time. The background and world building so far feel very carefully thought out and constructed, even if some of the writing needs to be punched up just a little. It's the kind of confused, jumping into the deep end kind of experience that many of us gamers have had time and time again, where a game world is so unique and different and dense that we can't help but be drawn in immediately, if only to try and understand what the fuck is going on here. Diluvian Ultra has a fantastic magnetism about it in that regard, and I think the best way I can even try and begin to sum it up is synthwave hexen. If that sounds remotely interesting, you're in for a good time already. Gameplay mechanics also feel fairly unique. Health and armor stack up like they do in other FPS titles, but you can't have more armor than the amount of health you have at the current moment, which isn't something I've ever seen before and I actually kind of like. It provides momentum and tension to the game. There are genuine stakes at any given moment. You take damage from using a ground-pounding smash attack from the air. You take damage from offering blood to waystones that act as both checkpoints and upgrade sites. While there are resources literally all over the environment for you to interact with, there's also plenty of danger and damage to take, so you'll constantly be on edge as you explore this harsh, alien environment. There is so much here at first that it can be visually and mentally overwhelming, but it settles into a kind of groove. Combat works in that your left mouse button is your primary attack and your right mouse button is your secondary. The knight carries a blood sword, and at first when I saw that both buttons swung the sword with no difference, I was a little confused. But once I started picking up other weapons and saw that the right mouse would still swing the sword for melee purposes, I kind of understood what was going on. Kind of. You see, using the sword in mid-air does an air dash forward for a slash attack, also useful for getting across large gaps that a double jump won't cover. Man, I gotta say that right click to dash is super fucking weird. Like, really fucking weird. I'm so used to using shift key to dash in other FPS games that I kept instinctively hitting shift anytime I wanted to do a dash, even when I finally got used to using the right mouse to actually perform the dash. Another thing that makes gameplay slightly awkward is that most item pickups are hidden within other objects that you have to break open, so you're constantly swinging your blood sword at everything in order to reveal the health, armor, and ammo contained within. Simultaneously, shift key is used for sprinting, which is nice. You kids who've been watching me for a while know that I'm not the biggest fan of auto run and that I prefer shift key to sprint when I want to, but having a run button and a separate air dash button almost felt weirdly unwieldy. Half the time I was running around, I wasn't entirely sure which buttons I was trying to press or when I should, which left a bitter taste in my mouth. Personally, I think, and I can't believe I'm saying this, that it would be better to just have auto run on and switch the dash key to shift. There is an option in the settings to select always run, but currently in the demo there's no option to rebind command keys, so I wasn't able to switch the dash over to the shift key and try out my theory. Here's hoping future updates will allow for this. Weapons are unique and honestly really fun concepts. The knight finds an insectoid being which he refers to as a squire, something that should be populating his now barren kingdom. The squire operates as an energy pistol with unlimited regenerating ammo, which you can let regenerate over time, or hit the reload button to get a fresh clip. By far the most endearing aspect of this is that you pet your squire to reload. You pet your squire to reload. I cackled. I was giddy. That is amazing, and immediately made me feel close to my squire in a way that few games have ever made me feel close to a pet. I wanted to protect it at all costs, even as it was protecting me. The second weapon in the demo is the Ion Impaler, which specifically does damage to enemy armor and stuns them. And while it doesn't do any outright physical damage, swapping between the Impaler to weaken enemies and then to the squire to finish them off is damn satisfying. And the Ion Impaler's special ability is that it will refill your armor to whatever the current max is at the cost of ammunition, which is, again, really fucking satisfying. Saving is done through waystones, where the prince offers some of his own blood to activate the stone and then also purchase upgrades if he has enough points. Blood is a huge factor in this game as the prince is somewhat vampiric, and after killing one too many foes, he'll go into a blood rage and enter a sort of berserker state where he does double damage, but dying in this state means he can't be resurrected at the waystone. The only way to quell the blood rage is by consuming blood from fallen enemies. It's an interesting risk-reward system, which is a little dulled by the fact that the prince is just a little too goddamn squishy for his own good. Seriously, I died so many times during this demo that I was a little shocked by it. I appreciate that the blood rage is due to the fact that the prince has expended a bunch of energy and now needs to feed, but if he were a little more resilient to begin with, it would work better. I'm not trying to be too harsh on this one because, believe it or not, Diluvian Ultra is possibly the game that I am the most interested in out of all the demos I played during Nextfest. The pixel art is bold and daring. The soundtrack is killer. The sound effects and deep world building are enthralling. But at the moment, the game's controls and combat are just a little too weak to be satisfying. Upgrades that you purchase through Waystones can even be lost if you die too much, which feels less like a consequence and more like a punishment. Also, much like Hellscreen, the default audio on this is set way too low, and even after turning up the volume, I felt like I had a really hard time hearing anything in the game. I am enthralled with the idea of this game. Everything about this game is almost daring you to make sense of it, and while I haven't been able to yet, it's not going to stop me from trying. Diluvian Ultra is weird as fuck, and I love that. But I've got my fingers crossed and hopes high that the devs can smooth out the controls and audio issues before release. This is a cult classic in the making. Oh, speaking of cults... Oh fuck, I have been waiting for this game. I saved playing Cultic for last due to the fact that this has been near the top of my most anticipated list for a while, and developer Jason Smith fucking delivered a full-on 90s throwback retro shooter full of crazy intense situations, up close and personal violence, and the kind of raw FPS experience that you only got from build engine games. The game has you diving headfirst into investigating a local cult, and by investigating I mean systematically executing them one by one until you get to their leader. Armed with a hatchet, a Mauser pistol, and a damn fine shotgun, the demo has you investigating the cult's warehouse out in the forest for some violent answers. This slaps. This just fucking slaps. The sound effects are beefy and crunchy. The graphics, the voxel-based graphics, holy fucking shit, are just as crunchy as the sound effects, employing a CGA graphical look to them. The controls are fluid, the combat is immediate and vicious, and rarely lasts very long until either you or the cultists are on the floor. Whether shooting from afar or swinging your hatchet up close, the violence in this game feels personal, intimate, unflinching. It's a rare thing where I can feel the protagonist's motivations simply from the combat alone, but there's an element of Dirty Harry style revenge felt in the punch of every bullet that lands in this game. I imagine the main character is kind of a cross between Philip Marlowe and Caleb from Blood, a grizzled loner on a mission for retribution that he knows he probably won't be coming back from. It's so good. It's so good. Two quick criticisms I have. Number one, there's no option currently to use the mouse wheel to swap between weapons, which is how I usually go through my arsenal when I play FPS games. There is a very useful weapon wheel you can access by pressing tab, which is fine, and it works really well, but hopefully there can be an option to use the mouse wheel in the final release. And second, unlike Hellscreen and Diluvian Ultra, Cultic is loud. Like, really loud. So loud that I had to turn down the volume by a significant degree. You know, I really just want to go on at length about this one, but if I went into everything about this game that works for me, we'd be here for a long time. Like how almost every item in the game is interactable, where you can pick up objects and hurl them at foes. And like the soundtrack, which evokes a type of hopeless mission sensation that really good last man standing Hollywood action flicks employ. Like how the grungy, grimy graphics are fucking gorgeous and stylistic. Like how, whenever you kill the last enemy in a nearby radius, the game will go into slow motion for just a moment, sparking extra satisfaction from taking out the bastards. And that satisfaction is necessary for motivation to keep pushing forward because this game is hard. It pulls no punches in the difficulty department, much like Selaco and, what is no doubt a heavy inspiration for this game, Blood. I didn't end up completing the demo because I mismanaged my ammunition and walked into an area with few resources and just ended up dying more times than I'm willing to admit. But best be sure that once Cultic rears its two-fisted head in either early access or full release, I am already there ready to tackle some nasty Cultic foes and make them regret drinking the Kool-Aid. This game is primed to be an adrenaline shot of pure tension, delivered straight to the heart with edge of your seat intensity and unfiltered mayhem. That might sound like a lot of hyperbole, but kids, you'd better believe it. Cultic is my personal favorite game of Nextfest. And there we have it, kids. A selection of demos that made my dadly eyebrows raise in excitement and anticipation, and I'm so very, very much looking forward to each of these eventually finding their way into my greedy little hands to play the full versions. Now, if you'll excuse me, I really need to get back to... Sit up straight, stay hydrated, and go play some of these demos for yourselves, kids. You don't have to take my word for it. I'll see you next time.